You know, I really like tea. As of yesterday, we finally got patch 1.04 for Grand Theft Auto The Trilogy, the Definitive Edition. So this patch released for PlayStation 5, PS4, the Xbox version, and PC. Now, the patch notes also listed as available for Switch, but the Nintendo Switch version got its own version of this update a couple of days before it released for every other platform, but I'll get into that more a little bit later. For the moment, I want to go over the patch notes and highlight a few things. Now, I'm playing the PC version of these games, so most of my experiences with this new patch are going to relate primarily to the game as it applies to PC, but I'm going to go over a few of the console issues as well. So after waiting for 2 months for this patch, you're expecting a comprehensive list of a bunch of different fixes and changes that they've made to the game, and Rockstar honestly didn't disappoint. There's a ton of bug fixes for collisions, textures, signage, mission scripts, GPS, all kinds of stuff like that. There's also some achievements from each of the 3 games that got updated and patched because some of them were not unlocking correctly. Now, this in particular stands out as interesting to me because I had this exact same issue in Vice City with the Born in the 80s achievement. I'm on PC, and no matter what I do, this achievement is totally broken and will not unlock. But it only seems to be a PC issue and for people who are playing the game since the 1.03 patch came out. Major bugs like that one mission in Vice City where they're driving the armored truck and they never make the turn into that garage at the very end and basically breaking the mission for you, that has now finally been fixed. The crashes, the save file corruption, the progression issues, all of that has now been fixed around the Blood Bowl event in San Andreas. And this was like the one thing that was really keeping people from progressing and actually getting a proper playthrough of the game done. Additionally, we've seen some quality of life improvements made, most specifically in Grand Theft Auto 3 and San Andreas. For GTA 3, Claude now flips off cars that honk at him like he used to do in the original. The K-Jaw radio icon has now been fixed. In San Andreas, CJ's got new textures for his jeans and they look much better. They also tweaked some of the character textures, some of the UI, tweaked a few of the haircuts, and improved the camera controls for the RC missions. Even though this update has brought in a lot of good and fixed a lot of issues, especially pertaining to missions or textures or sign upscaling, it's brought in a lot of bad too. For Grand Theft Auto 3, they removed some of the interiors and some of the stores, so now you can't look in and see where you previously could. Not really sure why this was. The current popular theory is that it was done to improve performance, but seeing as that GTA 3 wasn't the main game to have the most performance issues, that just feels odd. Probably one of the most requested and longest coming features that was finally added in for this was to add taillights and proper brake lights to the back of vehicles. I mean, how did this not come at launch? But thankfully we finally have it now. Additionally, even though the patch notes say that they fixed the flight controls for the Dodo on the PC version, it is most certainly not fixed. I went in the controls section and you cannot change the controls for this. So then I went and tried flying the plane with the original GTA 3 controls, which are numpad 9 and 6, and just like when the game first came out, it did nothing. So no idea why the patch notes said this, but it is, like I said, definitely not fixed. Secondly, there's been an issue in the trilogy since the game first came out back in October. And the issue is, if you play with any viewing distance that's higher than a medium setting, you're gonna get really bad texture pop-in where it will like load a building, but like not really load the details from the textures until you get real up close to it and then it just pops in. Very, very immersion breaking, really not great. The issue is that ever since this update came out, this problem has actually gotten slightly worse. I noticed it more predominantly when playing Vice City after this patch, even though it had already been a very noticeable issue beforehand. Now I will say, there is an edited custom settings.ini file online that you can download for the PC version of the game that a modder made that fixes the LOD and pretty much solves this entire issue. However, it does so at the cost of performance, and really heavily so at the cost. It fixed the whole issue of loading in textures for San Andreas and Vice City for me, but my frame rate got really choppy, especially when I went from a closed setting to like an open setting when it was gonna have to render in a bunch of distance. And I'm using an RTX 3070. So yeah, I guess it's kind of obvious why Rockstar hasn't implemented a fix for this yet, because they probably frankly don't know how to do it in a way that won't cause massive performance issues. And speaking of massive performance issues, this update apparently broke fidelity mode on consoles, which is the more high-end graphics settings for the console ports of this game. I've seen several people on Discord talking about issues with frame pacing, with the frame rate being substantially lower now, and this is all when they said there were performance fixes for the game as well. Now, earlier I mentioned that they had been working on fixing achievements, and my first inclination was to check the one broken achievement that I can't unlock in Vice City, which is Born in the 80s. And unfortunately, this has not been fixed. It is still completely broken on PC. Lastly, I'd like to touch on the Nintendo Switch version of this, which got the patch a little bit earlier. Now, the Nintendo Switch version has long since been the worst version of this game, and at launch, people basically said that it was almost unplayable in terms of how bad the performance was. And that version seemed to get the biggest improvement with performance fixes from this patch. So the status of that version of the game has turned from don't even try to, yeah, it kind of works now. I mean, it's still the worst version of this game, but if you really want to play it on the Switch, at least it's a feasible option now. So, while I'm glad we got this patch and it fixed a lot of issues with the game, it's definitely still broken and still needs some work. I'm hoping we'll get another patch soon and not have to wait a couple of months for the next one. And given the amount of people that are still talking about it and still experiencing various issues, I'm actually fairly confident that we will get one, at least eventually. I will say that in spite of all the issues the Definitive Edition has, I still think it's the best way to play the trilogy, and it still tops the experience you would get from simply playing the originals, due to all the enhancements that the remasters actually have. I've been having a blast playing through them all live on the channel, and we'll be streaming San Andreas again soon. So, if you want to see that, be sure and make sure you're subscribed. Leave a like if this video helped you, if you enjoyed it, and yeah, that's all from me for today. Thank you guys very much for watching. Until next time, I've been your host, Kes Gaming, and I will see you all at the top.